Dubro Suspicion Files.
Look up at the sky right now. I mean, maybe it's a perfect, brilliant blue.
Hopefully it is.
Yeah, hopefully. But then you notice it. That thin white line from a jet passing way overhead.
At cruising altitude, 35,000 feet up.
Exactly. Now, if you watch it, I mean, really watch it, what does it do? Does it do what you expect?
Does it fade away?
Right. Does it just vanish after a minute or two, or does it hold?
And if you've been paying attention to the sky over the past, say, 20 years or so, you know the answer.
You do. It's often the second one. Instead of vanishing, that trail just persists. It hangs there.
And an hour later, it's not a line anymore. It's widened out. It's gotten softer.
It spreads, and it's been joined by other trails, other lines that seem to be laid in these, I don't know, precise parallel patterns.
Sometimes even crossing, making these big X's or grids in the sky.
And by late afternoon, that brilliant blue you started with, it's gone. It's been replaced by this heavy, persistent sort of milky veil.
This is what the internet calls the white sky.
And it's a visual phenomenon that virtually everyone has seen, whether they've thought about it or not. And it is right at the heart of one of the most enduring, complex and volatile conspiracy theories of the last 30 years.
It really is. And our sources for this deep dive, they immediately define the conflict here. You have two competing explanations for that white sky.
On one side, you've got the official scientific explanation. These are contrails.
Just condensation. Harmless trails of frozen ice crystals whose behavior depends entirely on atmospheric physics. Simple as that.
But then on the other side, you have the darker claim, the persistent claim.
Chemtrails.
The idea that this is a secret, large-scale atmospheric spraying program conducted by governments for nefarious, potentially even apocalyptic ends.
And our mission today, it's not just to come in and say, one's right, one's wrong. It's not just simple debunking.
No, that's not enough here.
It's not, because what we found in the source material is that the chemtrail theory is now, it's completely tangled up with three documented factual realities.
Okay, let's list them.
1, currently deployed, non-secret weather modification.
Yeah.
There's real. 2, theoretical, but highly realistic climate intervention research. That's also real.
And the third?
And 3, documented historical military operations that were explicitly hidden from the public. That happened.
So we're here to help you, the learner, untangle what we're calling this great conflation.
That's the perfect term for it.
We really need to show you the difference between physical impossibility, what simply cannot be happening based on our best science and verifiable historical fact,
The stuff the government has already done.
and what current scientists are actively and very publicly proposing we do in the future.
And that untangling, that's precisely why we've given this deep dive a difficulty rating of 3 stars.
It's difficult.
It is, because it's blurry.
It's incredibly blurry. If you just try to dismiss the whole thing with this simple word contrail, you're ignoring that deep, verified history that creates the distrust in the first place.
You ignore the blueprints. You ignore the real geoengineering patterns that exist. And you ignore the current theoretical plans being debated by institutions like, the White House and the UN.
So we have to proceed very carefully here.
Ruthlessly. We need to focus on what is scientifically known, what is theoretically possible based on verified blueprints, and what has been definitively proven to be false by the scientific consensus.
Okay, so let's unpack this thing. To really get why this theory took hold and why it's so sticky, we have to start with the core claim itself.
You have to understand what people are actually alleging.
Right, and we have to trace its rapid rise, which, as you mentioned, basically coincides perfectly with the birth of the public internet in the 1990s.
The timing is everything.
The central thesis, the core idea, is that these persistent lines are chemtrails, and that term is important.
It is, because believers use it to draw a sharp line in the sand. They're making a distinction between what they see as a simple, normal, dissipating condensation trail.
A contrail.
And a chemical-laden line that is specifically designed to persist, to stick around.
They believe these are the visible evidence of a massive secret atmospheric spraying program. And they often claim the aircraft involved aren't just your standard passenger jets.
No, the theory posits a whole hidden fleet.
Yeah.
Either modified tanker aircraft, big white unmarked planes.
Or, in another version of the theory, it's standard jets that are just running chemical additives directly in their fuel supply.
Right. And what makes this theory so incredibly resilient, so hard to pin down, is the the massive adaptive scope of the alleged motives.
This isn't just one single plot.
No, it's a conspiracy soup. It offers an explanation for almost any perceived global problem you can think of.
So let's start at the most legitimate sounding motive.
Okay, at the highest level, the one that sounds almost plausible, you have solar radiation management, SRM, geoengineering.
The idea of spraying something to block incoming sunlight and cool the planet.
Exactly. And that motive, it caters to people who are genuinely concerned about climate change, but who deeply distrust the government's approach to solving it.
But the motives don't stay there. They shift very quickly into much darker territory.
Oh, immediately.
Huh?
And that's what gives the theory its broad appeal. It taps into these wider structures of distrust.
So proponents will leap from climate intervention to things like psychological manipulation.
Or, this is a big one, human population control. The idea that the chemicals being sprayed are designed to, say, sterilize or weaken the population over time.
And then you get to the most extreme motive, the one that, turns it from a secret program into a full-blown global crime.
Which is the claim of outright biological or chemical warfare conducted against an unsuspecting populace on the ground.
The sheer breadth of the why means that whatever your personal flavor of distrust is, distrust of big pharma, the military, the UN, whatever, the chemtrail theory has a motive tailored specifically for you.
It's a plug-and-play conspiracy.
And as we said, we can actually trace the origin of this specific chemtrail narrative with surprising precision. It's not some ancient myth, it's a modern invention.
It is. The sources we looked at identify 4 distinct catalysts that really created this narrative and launched it into the public consciousness in the mid to late 90s.
Where does it start?
It starts with the original observers.
Yeah.
You have to think of people like a guy named William Wallace back in the mid-90s.
Okay.
He's one of the first people to start noticing, and more importantly, filming what he called oddly numerous contrails. And he was very focused on them, forming strangely specific patterns.
So he's documenting a real visual change. These persistent trails are becoming more common, but he's immediately attributing a sinister intent to it.
Precisely. And these early videos, they get circulated through what was then the nascent internet.
Yeah.
Early online forums, peer-to-peer sharing.
This is the crucial initial visual proof that something in the sky is different than it used to be.
That footage then catches the eye of the second catalyst, the first investigator.
A journalist.
A journalist and former pilot named William Thomas. And our sources are clear. Thomas was initially very skeptical, which of course gives his later work a lot more credibility for believers.
Because he was a convert.
He was a convert. He examined the footage. He noted the regularity of jets flying in these parallel lines, something that, from his pilot background, he felt was highly unusual outside of military operations.
And he started investigating full-time.
Full-time. And he is widely credited with coining and really popularizing that specific term, chemtrails, through his articles and his increasingly frequent radio appearances.
Which brings us to catalyst number 3, the radio appearances.
Yes. The broadcaster, the real amplification engine that took this theory from a few niche internet forums and made it a national phenomenon.
And this was, of course, the late-night radio host Art Bell.
Art Bell and his wildly popular show Coast to Coast AM starting around 1999.
When you have that kind of platform, a charismatic host, a huge dedicated audience, and a format designed to explore the unusual and the unexplained,
a visually compelling theory like chemtrails just explodes.
Yeah. Suddenly, it's not just a handful of people online, it's millions of people across North America being encouraged every night to look up at their own sky and apply this new lens of suspicion.
And finally, you have the fourth, and maybe the most critical catalyst, the one that gave the whole theory a kind of political and historical weight.
The Trigger document.
The Trigger document. This is the 1996 United States Air Force research paper.
And its title is just perfect for a conspiracy.
It is. It's called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025.
Owning the weather? I mean, you couldn't write it better.
You couldn't. And this document was, in reality, a thought experiment. It was a research paper about the future, theoretical use of weather modification tech in warfare.
Things like creating artificial cloud shields to block enemy surveillance or communications.
Right. But crucially, it was written by military thinkers. It had the Air Force letterhead on it. It lent this air of real authority.
So to a believer who finds this document online in 1999, this isn't theoretical at all.
No. To them, it's definitive proof. It's the military admitting that they've thought about it, and therefore they must be actively practicing it, weaponizing the atmosphere right now under the guise of normal flight operations.
It supplied the motive, the capability, and the perpetrator, all right there in a U.S. government document. The whole thing was gift-wrapped.
So we have a clear origin story. It's rooted in visual observation. It's amplified by new media, and it's anchored by a very real government document.
Okay, so now we have to look at the specific evidence that proponents actually rely on today. The case file, as it were, is built on three pretty distinct categories of alleged proof.
And we can break these down. The first two are anecdotal and observational. They're about what you see and what you feel.
And the third one tries to use empirical data.
Right, which is why it's so often touted as the smoking gun, the hard proof.
Let's start with Exhibit A. This is the big one.
Exhibit A is the visuals, the behavior distinction. This is the primary proof for most people. It's what you see when you look up.
Proponents claim they can distinguish a standard harmless contrail from a chemtrail by looking for two key characteristics that, in their view, defy normal physics.
The first characteristic is persistence.
The idea that a true contrail should be short-lived. It should fade quickly.
In their framework, if you see a trail that lingers for hours, slowly spreading out to form that pervasive white sky haze we talked about,
It must contain chemicals.
it has to. Binders or stabilizers, something designed to keep that aerosol aloft for a prolonged period, so the release can be effective on a global scale.
And the second key behavior is patterning.
This is huge. Proponents look at the sky and they don't see random air traffic. They see trails lead in what they call odd patterns.
Those deliberate-looking parallel lines, the X patterns, the grids.
To them, this can't be a coincidence. This patterning signals a systematic, intentional, large-scale release that's being managed from the ground. It confirms the secret nature of the mission.
So if the visuals are the evidence that the spraying is happening,
Then Exhibit B establishes the consequence.
Exhibit B is the sickness, the personal threat. This is absolutely critical. This is the mechanism that transforms an abstract global conspiracy into a direct, personal, somatic fear.
It brings it down to earth.
Literally. The idea that this atmospheric spraying has direct physical consequences for you and your family on the ground.
And the claims here are. They're very serious.
Yeah.
And they're widely cited within the community.
For instance, we found a formal question that was submitted to the European Parliament back in 2012.
Right. And it cited reports that these trails were being linked to a whole host of serious, otherwise unexplained illnesses.
Things like tumors, Parkinson's disease, cardiac dysfunction. The narrative is that the chemicals released by the aircraft rain down, they get into the local water supplies, they're in the air we breathe.
And they're making people sick.
But there's one link that, according to our sources, truly makes the story stick for many people.
The connection to Morgellons syndrome.
Can you explain what that is for people who might not be familiar?
Sure. Morgellons is it's a very controversial condition where people experience these persistent, painful skin lesions.
Okay.
And they have the sensation of crawling or biting or stinging under their skin. And it's often accompanied by the appearance of these strange, sometimes colorful thread-like fibers that seem to emerge from the wounds.
And the medical establishment?
The medical establishment really struggles with a definitive diagnosis. It's often diagnosed as delusional parasitosis, which leads many sufferers to feel completely dismissed by doctors.
And chemtrail proponents seize on that.
They absolutely do. They argue that the syndrome is directly caused by the biological or the polymeric agents in the trails. They claim these are specifically designed to cause serious deterioration in the body.
So it provides an external, powerful, secretive perpetrator.
For a type of chronic suffering that is often dismissed by official science, it gives people an answer.
Okay, so if the effect is sickness and the visual proof is the persisting trails, the final piece is the chemical evidence itself.
The alleged smoking gun.
Exhibit C is the chemical footprint.
This is where the concept of citizen scientists really comes into play.
Right. These are individuals who go out and they collect their own samples. Rainwater, snow, dust, soil.
Usually after a day of what they describe as heavy spraying.
And these samples are then sent off to typically local environmental or agricultural labs.
And that's a key detail. They're not going to specialized atmospheric testing centers. They're going to local labs.
And the results, proponents argue, contain a chemical cocktail that just shouldn't be there.
There's a very specific list of chemicals that comes up again and again in this literature.
Let's name them.
The most commonly and consistently cited are barium, specifically barium salts,
Aluminum, usually in the form of aluminum oxide.
strontium,
And sometimes even radioactive thorium, along with various synthetic polymer fibers.
So for a proponent, When they get that lab report back and it shows high or even trace concentrations of these heavy metals in their backyard soil or their rainwater.
That's it. That is definitive proof. The smoking gun of an artificial, chemical, and toxic release program. The case is closed. So the case file laid out by the proponents is, it's specific, it's visual, and it's genuinely alarming.
It is. It creates a very compelling narrative.
But if we're going to seek a nuanced truth here, we have to transition. We have to move from anecdote and flawed testing to fundamental, non-negotiable atmospheric physics and chemistry.
This is the autopsy part, and we have to begin by establishing the highest level of authority we can find on this.
Which is the scientific consensus.
The scientific community doesn't just, wave this away. It has formally investigated and rejected the claim.
So this isn't just a general feeling. There was an actual study.
There was. In 2016, researchers at the Carnegie Institution for Science and the University of California, Irvine conducted a really unique study specifically to address the chemtrail claims.
Okay.
They didn't just poll random scientists. They sent a formal survey to 77 of the world's leading atmospheric chemists and geochemists.
The very experts whose job it would be to detect a massive, secret atmospheric spraying program if one existed.
These are the people who would know. They're looking at trace elements in the atmosphere all day, every day.
They were looking for Tier 1 evidence from the source experts, and the results.
They were about as definitive as you can get in science.
When asked if they had ever, in their professional work, come across any evidence that would support the existence of a secret, large-scale atmospheric spraying program,
76 of the 77 scientists, a staggering 98.7%, responded that they had not.
no evidence at all.
None.
Now, people are going to ask, what about the one? The one dissenting scientist.
And the sources are very clear on this, that one scientist didn't provide evidence of a spraying program.
Okay, so what did they say?
They simply cited one single, unexplained instance of high strontium in a remote soil sample from decades ago.
Which is what scientists call an anomaly?
Exactly. It's an anomaly, not conclusive proof of a massive, ongoing global operation. The message from the scientific community is crystal clear. The experts responsible for monitoring the atmosphere do not see evidence of this program.
Okay, so that brings us to the core of the visual claim, the part that everyone sees.
Exhibit A, the visuals, persistence and patterns. We need to spend a little time here because the entire conspiracy is completely reliant on the listener misunderstanding some basic atmospheric physics.
Let's break it down then. Contrail formation, how does it actually work?
It's pretty simple. A plane is flying at high altitude, right? Usually above 26,000 feet, which is in the upper troposphere.
And up there, it is incredibly cold.
Incredibly cold. Often dipping below minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius. They're the same at that point.
The jet engine's exhaust, though, is hot. But more importantly, it contains two essential ingredients.
One, a huge amount of water vapor. That's just a byproduct of burning hydrocarbon fuel.
And two, soot particles. Tiny little particulates that act as condensation nuclei.
So when that hot, humid exhaust hits the hypercool ambient air, the water vapor instantly condenses onto those soot particles.
And it freezes.
Instantly. It freezes into billions and billions of tiny ice crystals. It is literally a man-made cloud.
Okay, so that brings us to the billion-dollar question for the entire chemtrail theory.
Why does that cloud sometimes disappear in seconds and other times linger for hours?
Proponents say the difference is chemicals. Scientists say the difference is 100% dependent on one single variable.
The humidity of the surrounding air at that specific altitude.
So there are two scenarios.
Two very simple scenarios. Scenario one is the low humidity or dry sky at altitude.
Okay.
If the upper atmosphere up there is dry, those tiny ice crystals do something called sublimation.
They turn directly from solid ice into invisible water vapor?
Correct. They skip the liquid phase entirely, and the contrail vanishes, sometimes almost as fast as it forms. This is the short-lived contrail that everyone remembers from their childhood.
All right, so then we have scenario two.
The high humidity, or wet sky, at altitude. If the upper atmosphere is highly humid, there's a specific condition scientists call supersaturation with respect to ice.
Those ice crystals are stable.
They're stable. They don't sublimate. In fact, if there's enough moisture, they can even grow.
And so the contrail will persist for minutes or even hours.
And the high-altitude winds, which are often very fast, will carry them and spread them out, forming what atmospheric scientists call artificial cirrus clouds.
Which are physically indistinguishable from natural high-altitude clouds because they're made of the same stuff.
They're both just ice crystals. And the entire visual conspiracy relies on what we can call the humidity gap.
Explain that.
Proponents are on the ground. They look up, they see a clear, dry, sunny day, and they conclude, logically, that the contrail should fade quickly.
But when it persists, they assume it must be because of chemicals.
And that is the fundamental error. They are confusing dry ground conditions with high-altitude humidity.
The humidity at 30,000 feet is governed by jet streams and massive weather fronts that have absolutely nothing to do with whether it feels humid in your backyard.
Not a thing. A persistent white sky is a direct signal of high-altitude humidity and stability for ice crystals. In fact, the National Weather Service uses the persistence of contrails as a predictable signal.
A signal for what?
For increasing moisture at altitude. It often predicts that more cloud cover or a change in the pressure system is on its way hours later. It's just physics, not a secret spraying program.
And what about the grid patterns, the deliberate-looking lines?
This is, quite simply, an observation error. It's driven by a cognitive bias called patternicity.
Our brain wanting to see patterns.
The American Meteorological Society explains that what proponents interpret as a deliberate grid is just the visual accumulation of multiple, separate commercial aircraft, all following standard, FAA-mandated, well-defined flight corridors over a busy period.
So it's a highway in the sky.
It's a highway. Think about it. All the air traffic between, say, New York and LA has to pass through defined high-altitude lanes.
So if you have 50 planes fly through that same lane corridor over a 3-hour period, and the atmospheric conditions up there are right for their trails to persist,
you will inevitably see parallel lines. You will inevitably see crisscrossing X patterns as different corridors intersect. It's a traffic jam, not a chemical assault.
Okay, so that covers the visuals. Let's move to the chemical claims. The smoking gun.
REAT, Exhibit C, the chemical footprint. This is where the citizen science falls apart. The samples are, from a scientific perspective, completely invalid.
Why? On what grounds?
They fail on two fundamental grounds: abundance and collection methodology.
Let's start with the abundance flaw.
When proponents get a soil sample back that shows alarming levels of aluminum, they're committing a very common geological misunderstanding.
Aluminum isn't rare.
It's not just common. Aluminum is the third most abundant element in the Earth's crust.
Okay, so it's everywhere.
It is in every soil sample, every piece of dust, every clay particle on the planet. Find it is completely meaningless.
What about barium and strontium?
Same problem. They're naturally occurring elements that are found commonly in the environment. They're in volcanic dust, they're in soil, they're even in road dust from asphalt and tire wear.
So finding these things in a random backyard soil sample is not anomalous.
It is expected. To prove an external introduction from an aircraft, you would need an impossibly precise baseline measurement taken before the alleged spraying.
And you'd need to find unique chemical isotopes or compounds that are not found in natural atmospheric dust, which they never do.
Never. Which leads directly to the second fatal flaw, the collection flaw.
The methods they use.
The citizen science methods are almost never sterile enough to detect trace elements accurately. Think about what you're trying to prove.
Yeah.
A small, secret release of aluminum from 30,000 feet up.
You would need pristine lab-grade collection protocols.
Absolutely. And our sources detail the common errors. Proponents are gathering samples in non-sterile plastic containers. They're using metal scoops. Sometimes they use mason jars with metal lids.
Which would immediately introduce contamination from the lid itself.
Of course. Dust collected from a rooftop or the hood of a car contains brake dust, soil runoff, industrial pollution from a nearby factory, all of which contain aluminum and barium.
So without sealed, non-reactive, Teflon-lined equipment and completely sterile protocols, the data they're using is scientifically inadmissible.
It's useless for proving atmospheric deposition. It's just noise.
Okay, so let's recap. The expert scientific consensus rejects the program's existence. The visuals are just basic atmospheric physics, and the chemical evidence is fatally flawed due to contamination and simple geological abundance.
When you put it under scrutiny, the popular chemtrail theory collapses pretty cleanly.
But if the case collapses that cleanly, then why are we still having this conversation? I mean, why is this theory so persistent?
Because the official denial, as clean as it is, just feels too simple for a lot of people. And that's because the official history of weather modification and government secrecy is, well, it's far from simple.
This is the pivotal shift in our deep dive. This is where we have to acknowledge the core reason for the persistent distrust.
We're moving away from the current debunked conspiracy to the verified historical and theoretical facts that provide this powerful concrete kernel of truth.
The believers didn't invent the idea of spraying the sky.
No, they just invented the current secret version of it. The idea was already there.
So let's start with the first piece of that kernel, Exhibit D, the Welsbach patent.
This is not a rumor. This is not something from an internet forum. This is a documented, verifiable piece of United States intellectual property.
U.S. Patent 5,003,186, filed in 1990 and granted to the Hughes Aircraft Company in 1991.
And the profound psychological effect of this document is it's undeniable, and it's all because of its title.
The title is Stratospheric Welsbach Seeding for Reduction of Global Warming.
Right there. The patent abstract describes, almost word for word, the core motive that the conspiracy claims is happening now.
It proposes a method which involves the seeding of the Earth's stratosphere with Welsbach-like materials in order to reflect incoming solar radiation and reduce global warming.
And the details align so perfectly with the conspiracy's other claims, specifically about altitude and chemicals.
The patent proposes that this seeding be done by planes flying at altitudes between 7 and 13 kilometers.
Which is what in feet?
That's roughly 23,000 to 42,000 feet. Exactly where commercial jets fly and where these persistent contrails form.
And the specific materials it cites for spraying.
The abstract explicitly mentions metallic oxides, and it specifically calls out aluminum oxide and thorium dioxide.
The exact same elements that citizen scientists years later would claim to be finding in their rainwater samples.
So what you have here is a 1991 blueprint from a major U.S. defense contractor that matches precisely the alleged motive, the alleged chemicals, and the alleged altitudes cited by the conspiracy.
We have to state that clearly. This proves that the idea of using jets to spray metallic oxides to dim the sun was a real patented concept 3 decades ago.
You can absolutely see why a person who discovers this document would immediately think, this is it, they're doing it.
It feels like a smoking gun.
Okay, so that's the blueprint. Next, we move to Exhibit E, the peer-reviewed paper.
If the Welsbach patent proved the plan, this paper, for a time, appeared to prove deployment.
This is the paper by J. Marvin Herndon from 2015, and the key thing here is that it was successfully published in a real journal.
The International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, that gave it the immense weight and authority of having been peer-reviewed.
And Herndon's claim was sensational.
It was. He alleged he had found the exact material being sprayed. He identified it as toxic coal combustion fly ash.
How did he claim to have done that?
He claimed to have compared the elemental composition of 8 different elements found in collected rainwater samples to the known leachate of coal fly ash.
And he said he found the elemental signatures to be essentially identical.
And he presented this conclusion with just staggering confidence. He claimed a 99% confidence interval match.
And he directly linked the alleged spraying to neurological disorders like Alzheimer's and autism.
For believers, this paper was the ultimate scientific validation. This was a peer-reviewed scientist confirming that the chemical assault was real, ongoing, and tied to serious health effects.
But the real historical anchor for all of this distrust, the element that provides the foundational psychological truth for the entire movement,
is Exhibit F, Operation Popeye, the Original Sin.
This is verified, Tier 1, declassified historical fact. This proves that the U.S. government has, in fact, secretly weaponized the weather.
From March of 1967 to July of 1972, the U.S. Air Force ran a massive, large-scale chemical weather modification program. The code name was Operation Popeye, and it took place during the Vietnam War.
The operation was based out of Thailand, and its goal was brutally specific and military.
The goal was to extend the monsoon season over the Ho Chi Minh Trail by an estimated 30 to 45 days.
The objective was purely logistical. It was about disrupting North Vietnamese supplies.
Make the roads muddy, cause landslides, watch out river crossings. The 54th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, which flew over 2,600 sorties.
They even had a dark, satirical slogan.
Make mud, not war.
And how did they do it? What was the method?
They used specially equipped aircraft flying into existing rain clouds, and they seeded them with lead iodide and silver iodide.
And crucially, they were flying at low to mid altitudes inside the clouds to accelerate the condensation process and make it rain harder and longer.
And here's a profound implication of Popeye that resonates with every distrustful person today.
It's a secrecy.
The program was highly classified. It was allegedly sponsored at the highest levels. We're talking Kissinger and the CIA.
And its very existence was categorically denied to Congress by the Secretary of Defense, Mel Laird, even as the operations were still ongoing.
Operation Popeye is the psychological foundation for the entire White Sky conspiracy.
It completely shatters the simple government defense of, oh, we would never do that.
The historical record proves they did. It proves capability, it proves motive, it proves multi-year deployment, and it proves a precedent for deep, calculated secrecy in weather warfare.
The question for believers then becomes, if they did it then, in secret, why would we ever believe they stopped?